Are
There, I
you?
was muted.
There we
She
go.
muted us all. um, I'm glad to have a candidate for city council. Which ward?
Fourth Ward.
Fourth. And you are an incumbent running for re-election. You do have opposition. If he shows up, we will. I'll set up some rules. But meanwhile, what you could do is give us ordinarily your spiel. I usually limit it to 5 minutes, but not now. You just speak as long as you want on what's of concern to you. And then once you're done with that, we can open it up to questions from people.
Okay, great. First, I just want to say thanks for inviting me to meet with you all again. I really appreciate Muleskinners. You all have been. I see that Ron is here.
Pardon me, Ron Graves is showing up. So forget this. I'm going to do it differently now.
Okay.
All right. Where is Ron Graves in this list?
Absolutely.
There.
And I will welcome Ron Graves. I'm David Robinson, president. And Leslie Clay is here to go over the ground rules for your discussion today.
Okay. And what we're going to do is I'll open it up to a 5 minutes. You have to talk about whatever pleases you, whether it's reading out a phone book or telling me about your background or what your positions are, whatever you feel like we should know in 5 minutes. And at the end, when it's 30 seconds to go, I will hold up this. And when you have 10 seconds to go, I'll hold up this. And then when you've used up your time, I'll hold up this. And then the other person has the same amount of time. After that, we'll open it up to questions. I ask that people keep their questions to 30 seconds or less because I'd rather hear from the two candidates than from us. And then when you have a question, I will alternate who has the first crack at answering it. Again, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. Again, 30, 10, and stop. And so it looks like Mr. Graves is still in an automobile. So why don't we give Mr. Foster the first crack at the first, and you're muted. Incidentally, both of you are muted. So unmute yourself, and Mr. Foster, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I really do appreciate being invited to talk with you all again. I appreciate the Muleskinners. I think that it's an example of what you've been doing since the 1960s in our community to inform the community about important things that are going on. And I think that's a very important role. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself, and I'll try to do this rather quickly. First, I'll say I've lived in a lot of different places. I was born in Fort Worth, Texas. My first memories are of Atlanta, Georgia. Most of my memories in childhood are from Birmingham, Alabama, where I grew up from age 7 and all the way through college. After college, I went to Louisville, Kentucky, and was in seminary there. And then for a period of time after I graduated seminary, I was traveling around the country as a storyteller, primarily working with church youth groups and college groups and churches in general. Enjoyed that work, but then eventually went to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I was at First Baptist Church as minister to students. For about 7.5 years, moved back to Alabama and took the pastorate of a church in a small town called Montevallo, which is 30 miles south of Birmingham. I was pastor there for about 7.5 to 8 years and then became executive director of the Alabama Poverty Project while still living in Montevallo. After being, before that, I left the pastorate to go to work with a group called Passport, which does camping for church, youth, and children's groups. Was there for 4 years, then 2 years as the director of the Alabama Poverty Project. And at about that point, I fell in love after having been married previously and then divorced and married my wife, moved to Bloomington, Indiana, where she was doing her PhD. Was the executive director for a Habitat for Humanity affiliate in Morgan County, which is just north of Bloomington. And I did a few other things like being a chaplain at a local nursing home, for instance. We moved to Columbia in 2010. And I've now lived here almost as long or longer than I've lived any other single place. I've lived more places than I ever thought that I would. After being here for about a year, I became executive director at Voluntary Action Center, retired from there at the end of 2020, became a school dad while we were in the pandemic, and then had about a 6-week period there where I was just retired, which was very nice. And then learned that my predecessor would not be running again, had conversations with a number of people, friends of mine, and some who reached out and said, "We think you should run." Decided to do that and was successful in my first attempt to be elected to the position and have really enjoyed the work. And I think that when I was asked the night of the election what I was thinking and what I was feeling, I said I felt really good about the result, but about I was looking forward mostly to doing the work. And that remains true today. I want to just simply do the work, and I think we've been effective as a council and city leadership in general. So a number of the things that we have done is we've improved city employee compensation that was long overdue. We got other things across the finish line that had just been sort of sitting around for a while, like automated waste collection. I've never had people thank me for more things than they have for roll carts, which has been somewhat surprising, but a welcome thing. We finally got the water plant upgrades started. That had been long overdue. We got a short-term rental ordinance passed, something that had also been in the works for several years. We finished the allocation of ARPA funds and got those distributed. And so then we've done a number of other things like addressing equity and inclusion issues, and we have new departments and facilities that have opened. And something that's near and dear to me, we increased social services funding, which had been flat for 10 years. A lot of, by the way, going back to city employee compensation, a lot of that had been flat for a good long while too. So I'm looking forward to moving forward now with other things that we need to do. Housing and homelessness is right at the top of the list of things that I feel like we need to address, and where I spend a lot of my time. Um, it took us a long time to get into the housing crisis that we're in now. It's going to take a long time to get out of it. But in the meantime, we need to address that as best we can. I'm also very interested in public safety in a number of ways, and I can talk about that more if you like. And infrastructure is an important part of what we need to do. Something that has been long overdue and long delayed is the installation of a new electric transmission line into the south and southwest portions of the city. I want to see that get done.
Thank you. All right. And Mr. Graves, if you can unmute and we can hear from, oh, here, I got to, I haven't done this recently. Let's see here.
Okay.
Yeah. You can start now.
Oh, there we go. I apologize. I'm actually, my wife and I are on our way to Kansas City. Our oldest son just recently got engaged, and his fiance is having her dress fitted tonight. And I guess it's very important for the mothers to get together and see that. So, but again, I apologize. I'm in the car. But a little bit about myself. My name is Ron Graves. I'm a lifelong resident of Columbia, born at Boone County Hospital. My mother was, my grandparents moved to Columbia in about 1933. My grandfather was a small business owner. He had a auto repair shop on 5th Street called Crane and Nichols Auto Service. My mom was a teacher here in Columbia public schools. Met my father on a blind date in college. My dad was from St. Louis and was an attorney in Columbia for about 4 years until he was involved in an accident with a client and her soon-to-be ex-husband in the late 60s. But I went to Russell Boulevard Elementary School. I went to West Junior High School and Hickman High School. After that, I left to go to the University of Missouri for, well, 5 years. I was on the long-term plan. I have a degree from the university in residential design and construction and interior design. And I was in that field for about 10 years. I worked at the University of Missouri for a short period of time. I worked at Phillips and Company, which was an electrical wholesaler, and I worked in the design area selling lighting and cabinets. And after about 10 years, I decided that I really didn't want to sit behind a computer designing things, and I really needed to be out talking to people. I had a very good friend who was at the university in fundraising, and she said that I really needed to look at that as a possible profession. So I interviewed for a position at Stevens College, and I went to work for Stevens for about 2 years in their development office. I moved from Stevens into more of the social services fundraising and worked for the Salvation Army. I worked for Rainbow House as they were moving into the beautiful building that they no longer have. And then also did fundraising for Westminster College in Fulton. For the past 6 years, I've worked at the VA hospital. I run the Voluntary Service Program, Center for Development. Are donors that donate items and money to the VA, and we help distribute funds and items to veterans that the federal government does a lot of with. A lot of veterans that are in our homeless to housing program, our HUD-VASH program, and then with a lot of other veterans just throughout doing things such as the Golden Age Games, which is a 55 and older veterans, kind of like a show me state for veterans, show me state games for veterans, and help them get enough funds to go to those type of events. So I have been a volunteer for Daniel Boone Little League in Columbia since 1991. I coached first when I was in college for a year, and then the girl I was dating really wasn't a baseball fan, so I, mistakenly thought I should stop coaching baseball. But in 1991, I started volunteering and coaching again, and then was on the board. And in 1996 to 99, I was president of their board of directors. I didn't coach again until my son was old enough in 2004, and then coached and stuff like that for their board for another 10 years. And then in 2014, I took over for Gary Kespel, who was a former city council person, as the district administrator for Little League Baseball, which is a national volunteer position. And I'm also the state director for Little League Baseball. That was a fast 5 minutes. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I wish I could. Okay, thank you. Now we're opening this up for questions. Incidentally, I should point out that if you don't, you can chat. You can submit questions via the chat if you wish, and I will try and get to those. But I see recently Dave Taylor did post both of your websites, so that's of interest. Now we're ready for questions. Is there anybody that has a question? If you can hold up your hand. I'm looking for hands. David Luthold, do you? Oh, all right, Kathy, your hand is up.
Yes. My question is, what are the 3 top priorities that each candidate would like to see the city council address?
Okay, well, now Nick Foster went, oh, shoot. I haven't used these timers in so long. Let's see here. I cancel this and cancel this one and start. I'm going to do this there. I have 2 minutes. I started out with Nick Foster, so Mr. Graves, you can answer the first one. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. The three main topics I have drilled down as the most important for my campaign is public safety. I feel like we don't have enough police officers in our city at any one time. Typically, there's 12 vehicles roaming around our city fighting crime. That's just not enough. We don't have enough there. The second would be infrastructure. That, as Nick had mentioned before, it's very important that we have the infrastructure project along Scott Boulevard and Nifong looked at and completed in some way. You know, that project has been put on hold for 10 years, and that's 10 years too long. Also, the other thing would be affordable housing in Columbia. Our wages have not kept up with the cost of housing in our area, and we really need to find a way that we can find more housing that is affordable, whether that be homes to purchase or apartments or living units to rent. We deal a lot of that with a lot of that with veterans, and I know there's a huge shortage. We have 40 veterans on a waiting list to get housing in our community, and we just can't find it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Foster, would you like to respond with your?
Sure. Well, I
three?
think that, one thing you discover once you're on council is there are so many things to keep up with that it's a challenge to focus. But I think that it's easy for me to point out three in particular. As I mentioned before, housing and homelessness. I think that the housing issue is a supply issue. And part of the reason that rents are so high is because we just don't have enough housing. Again, it took us a long time to get to this point, and it's going to take a long time to get us back. So I think that focusing on what it will take to get developers into a position where they feel like they can build the kind of housing that we need. And we need housing across the income spectrum, and we need all kinds of housing. So that's a big thing. And this contributes in a great way to the homelessness issue that we face. So if we can, so in the meantime, we need to manage our homelessness situation and provide as best we can for them. Second is public safety, and there are a number of things that go into that. We have increased the number of police officers we have on the police force. Council has always provided in the budget enough money to pay the number of police officers that the police department asks for. We've just had a hard time filling those positions, but we are making progress. Among the things that we've done to address that is to bring a police academy into the city itself. So we have our own police academy. I could talk a long time actually about the things that does, but among the things that it does is it trains people on our systems. And that means that once they're trained, they get into the field more quickly. And then adequate infrastructure. I mentioned this also about the electric line. But I think that what's indicative here is not only about the council, but the city manager and city staff who've addressed things like the water system, roll carts, and upgrades to the water system, and roll carts being rolled out, as it were. Sorry, I kind of hate saying that, but there it is. So these are the things that I'm primarily interested in.
Thank you very much. I saw a hand somewhere a minute ago.
David Mallory
had his hand up.
David
I lowered
Mallory,
it.
where?
But Sarah has put a question in the chat.
Oh, yes. Oh, you submitted the question in chat? Well, I don't mind if you submit it
Sarah did.
out loud.
Sarah submitted
I
one.
threw it in chat because it wasn't just like a burning question, but it's just a nice general question if things got quiet. I said, do you foresee any challenges or opportunities specific to the Fourth Ward in the next decade? Nice softball question.
All right. Well, Nick Foster gets to go first this time. So you have 2 minutes to tell us.
Well, I think that a lot of the things that the Fourth Ward faces are things that the city as a whole faces. I had a conversation that has stuck with me since the first time I ran at the door of a man whose daughter was living with him. And the reason that she was living at home was because she could not find housing that she could afford. This is someone who had a really good job at MU Hospital and had prepared to do this, but was having trouble doing it. And so she was back living at home. That has stuck with me. So I think that issue is true for the Fourth Ward in particular. Issues of infrastructure are true as well. There are things related to guttering, for instance, that I could talk about. There's private common collectors, which are a part of our sewer system. But the city is addressing these things, and I think that's important. I think it's important to remember too that frankly, the Fourth Ward is probably the most resilient ward in the city. It is the wealthiest ward, it's the highest educated ward, and it is, by the way, the whitest ward. And I think that's a significant issue to point out. It's also a ward that is concerned about those who are struggling in our city. And I think that's an important thing. That's what I hear from folks here. It's not that there are a bunch of wealthy people who are uninterested in those who are uninterested in those who are struggling. The members of the residents of the Fourth Ward are interested and want these issues to be addressed. So I'm grateful for that kind of approach, that kind of view, and because it really does align well with me and my concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. And now, Mr. Graves, unmute and tell us in 2 minutes the answer to that question.
Okay, yeah. I think the idea of the biggest issue in our ward is currently in transportation issues. We can talk about whether it's walkable or not. I really don't think that the Fourth Ward being mainly built in the late 50s, early 60s, when Columbia expanded west of West Boulevard. You don't see a lot of sidewalks in our area. I know that that's a big project now with the city, and they are starting to do that. It would be nice to quicken that process up, and I mean, it's an issue that should have been handled years and years ago. Crime is growing in the Fourth Ward. In the last month, we've had cars in my neighborhood being gone through. Somebody leaves it unlocked, and the next morning they come in and their glove box is open, their whatever. And you know, we just that is the main issues that I see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Is there another hand up or a question in the chat? Let's see here.
David Mallory had his hand up earlier.
Oh, yeah, he did. Do you still have a hand up?
Well, I think they both addressed it, but it was regarding crime. Again, they both discussed public issue and public safety crime. It seems like there are more and more reports of crime in Columbia all the time. Not being personally affected by it, I'm wondering, do the statistics support the idea that there is actual increase in the city crime rate, or are the reports just more anecdotal? If they are higher, how would you like to see it addressed? And that was my question. So if they both would like to address that more than what they have already.
Okay. Well, Mr. Graves, you get to go first this time.
Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button, and when I'm trying to unmute myself. You know, the statistics that I've seen show a small increase in the crime rate, but in my discussions with various police officers and the Columbia Police Officers Association, who have endorsed me, they have stated that that statistics are skewed a bit because of the way they're being reported at this point in time. It was told to me that if there is a crime happening, let's say somebody goes to a disturbance at a home and there were 3 or 4 crimes that could have been reported at that time, they're really only reporting the most important one. It's not all 3 crimes that are being reported. And that's a change in policy from what I understand from the police department and leadership. So I believe that our crime rate is greater in Columbia than really the statistics that we see, and that it's a reporting issue that needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, Nick Foster. And
Well, I think that, you know, we deal with the statistics that we have. And the stats that we have now show that there actually has been a reduction in much of the crime in the city over the last several years, but an uptick recently. A lot of that is around gun violence, and that's an issue that I am especially concerned about. There are too many guns available to too many young people in our city. They're unable to manage that, and they make really bad decisions. So a lot of what we're seeing is a result of that. I think it's important to note that our police department does an outstanding job of closing cases. I follow the press releases from the police department very quickly, and it's not unusual for them to put out a release that describes a crime that has taken place. This just happened in the past couple of days with a homicide in our city. Where the press release comes out, this is happening, police are investigating, and then within a day, usually, police have arrested the suspect that they believe is responsible for that. So we recently passed financing for the flock camera system. This is a license plate reader system, which should help them close those cases even faster and will be a force multiplier for us. Police will spend less time searching for someone because they have that information available to them more immediately. I'll be very interested in seeing how that works out. The Office of Violence Prevention is one of those things too, though, that I really do think we need to look to. We need to address the root causes of crime, the root causes of violence. So the city will continue to work through this office, and I think we're very close to hiring someone to lead the office. To work with our partners that are already on the ground doing this work in the city and are having impact in the city in that way. It's a complicated issue. It's not going to go away. Public perception is a real challenge in this regard. We could talk about that more if you like.
okay, thank you. You're right there on time. I see that there is a question from Mari Scala. It says, a question: how will your previous experience specifically contribute to your performance of city council duties? So, Mr. Foster, you get to go first now.
Sure. I don't talk about this a lot, but I'm going to talk about it with you all. When I ran the first time, I really ran with the intention of running for a second term if I were to be elected. And the reason for that is I knew good and well, even though I was fairly familiar with the way that the city works and with the processes of the city and so forth, I knew that I would learn a lot. I knew that it would be like a fire hose in my face. And I didn't realize that it would be like a fire hose 3 feet away from my face. And so it takes some adjustment just to get used to the incoming information that one receives and to learn more about the processes, the ins and outs, to get to know the department heads, develop relationships within the city structure and in the city as a whole, to know who the players are and where you can best expend your resources. So that's true for any job I've ever had. I've always felt like I got better at a job the longer I was in it. And I think that after 3 years of being in this position and having the kind of successes that we've had, I'm in a better position to move things forward in the next 3 years. So that was really the reason that I'm running again. People ask me sometimes, why are you doing this? I do it mostly because I feel that it's a way of contributing to the community. This is my means of service at this time, and it's something I want to continue. And I just want to point out one thing. I think people often are wondering, why do people run? And I do think sometimes people can run for office for selfish reasons. I don't think that's so much true on a local level. But I can tell you that this is not something that I need to do for myself. It's something I want to do. And I want to use my experience to contribute to the life of this community that I have grown to love so much and in which I feel deeply rooted.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Graves.
Yes. So while I don't have well, any experience in politics. I really think that the experience is the life that I've had in Columbia with my family, both stepfather and grandfather being small business owners, and seeing them how hard they've worked in this community, and the experiences that I have had working in the not-for-profit world, the social services world, and interacting with so many people in what I have done. I feel like I am qualified to be part of the this group of 7 that govern the city of Columbia. I really love my community. I've actually lived in the 4th Ward my entire life. Well, since I was 3. Before that, I lived on Jefferson Street off of Business Loop. But have followed politics in Columbia. I mean, I still remember Paul Albert when he was chastising the city council in the early mid 90s and 2000. You know, I championed those type of people that really sit and question whether we're doing the right thing up there, and it makes everybody think. So, so while I don't have the breadth and experience of being a politician in the past, I really think that what I have done in my professional and personal life has given me the ability to be part of this group.
Alice has her hand up.
Yeah, I see Alice does.
Thank you. So I'm a 4th Ward resident, but I've lived in the county as well as the city for my 40 years. So I've watched the city grow a lot from when I came here. So my question is, especially Nick, but you also as a lifelong Columbian, Ron, do you perceive that our form of government in the city may need to change? We have 3 full-time county commissioners in the county, a lot smaller population, maybe larger area, but the city has 1 full-time administrator. Do you foresee in the future changes maybe needing to change that in how Columbia is run?
Okay, well, Mr. Graves, you're the first one this time.
Great. I really haven't, to tell you the truth, done any research on the change in the way that the city governs itself, changes in what the possibilities are. I really don't believe that having full-time elected officials for our community is truly the way to go. I do believe, though, that we should expand the number of council people, because I think that it's been 6 council people and a mayor for as long as I can remember, and believe that representing, there needs to be less people that we represent, and to have a more varied voice in our elected officials. That would be the change that I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Foster.
Well,
you're
I want to
next.
say that sounds like a loaded question, because I bet Alice has an idea about what a change might look like.
I've just heard it talked about, Nick. I
Yeah.
don't know that much about it.
Okay, that's fine. And if you had an idea, I'd be interested in hearing it. But I think that we are growing at an incredible rate. I don't know that I would support moving from a city manager form of government to a strong mayor form of government, at least not at this point. And, I was interested to learn not too long ago that the mayor of Kansas City, that Kansas City has a city manager form of government. But from the looks of things, you would think that the mayor was running the day-to-day life of the city. He's not. I do think that we adjust the wards every few years. They were adjusted right after I was elected. We're each representing a little over 22,000 people. That's a lot, but it's something that I keep in mind too when I'm listening to things in city council and otherwise, to recognize that there are many voices that I'm not hearing. There is from time to time the idea floated of paying city council members better. That is attractive to me, not for my own benefit, but because I think that it would open up the possibility that we could have a more varied group of people who would run for city council. Right now, 3 of us are retired, are not working outside of what we're doing in government. I'm always amazed at the people who are working, that they're able to do the kind of work that's required on a council. Oh wait, there are 4 of us who are either not retired or not working a job otherwise. So I do think that that's something we'd want to look at, and in particular, and something that I think I would support. If I did support it, it would be something that would be put off a few years. I wouldn't look to benefit from that myself. I think it would also be helpful, by the way, if city council members had some staff to help us to do the things that we're doing day to day.
Okay, thank you. I see something in the chat. Scott Crystal, earlier you had talked about your top 3 issues. He asks, how do you suggest you can use your role to accomplish the item you say were your top 3 issues? What actions would you take or initiate? That's the crux of it, I guess. Okay, Mr. Foster, you're up.
Well, I feel like we've sort of spoken to this, both of us to some degree. I think that, well, let's talk about housing for a second. I could talk about that for a long, long time. This is where I spend a lot of my time. We do have a housing study that the city did in partnership with the county. And when we're talking about housing, really, when we're talking about a lot of things, when we're talking about things like infrastructure, in particular sewer development, something that the county is looking at really closely now, we need to work closely with the county, and we need to be aware of one another. We are the largest municipality in Boone County, and so we have a large role to play. But we are not entirely Columbia, and we are surrounded by rural areas. And some of those over time have been annexed and will continue to be annexed. And we need to do what needs to happen to prepare for that as the city continues to grow. But with the county, we did this housing study. There are a number of recommendations that come from that study. And I'm a part of a group called the Affordable Housing Coalition. I was a part of that group before I was elected. I have a lot of interest because of working with Habitat and so forth. We need to look at things like policies and procedures. I would, for instance, love to see us identify a kind of ombuds person in the housing department, which is the housing department was developed to bring focus to what we're doing with housing. I'd love to see an ombuds person in there to help developers work their way through city processes, which frankly can be really difficult and at expense, and does hinder them sometimes from doing the kind of work that they need to do. So that's one of the things I think I'm really focused on in particular, and that I think we can address.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Graves.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like to use or accomplish that I could accomplish is bringing back more police officers. I know that we have raised their starting salaries. We have had a lot of hires in the past 12 months. We've also had a lot of resignations in the last 12 months. Typically, you have the officers that have experience between 5 and 7 to 10 years that are resigning from our department and going to other departments. A lot of that hinges that those officers are now starting a family. They have kids. They don't want to work mandatory overtime any longer. They don't, they would like to spend time with their kids rather than working the mandatory hours that they have, because we don't have enough. The main impotence for them to resign also is that their retirement is not funded. It's $100 million short. And this year, the extra funding that was added to that was $1 million. It's going to take 100 years to get them funded correctly. we have been on the watch list for the governor for our police department retirement fund for the last 13 years. We need to change that. We need to, we need to fund their retirement, and that will help with our recruitment of police officers for our area. And I think that I could use my position to help find the budget funds in there to get that changed.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. We don't have much time for anything other than what's covered in the chat right now. I'll try and distill Sarah Johnson. How will you advocate for public transit? If you've seen the draft of the transit study, what do you think about timelines and goals they have? And how do you advocate for better transit options in the Route B corridor for shift workers? That's about 3 questions in one, really, but yeah, distilling it, advocate for public transit in Columbia, and especially for transit options in the Route B corridor. Mr. Graves?
Yeah, I believe that our bus system in Columbia is woefully lacking. When I was younger, I used to take the bus downtown from the 4th Ward over by Fairview Elementary School. Hard to find a bus in that area now. I have a staff member that doesn't have a vehicle, and he walks to work. He lives about 1.5 miles from the VA hospital. And on the days that he can't walk to work, he will not ride the bus because it takes too long for him to get that far because of the routes that the bus has. We have many veterans, for example, that live at Welcome Home that can't take a bus because they have to walk on a busy street with unsafe conditions to get to the closest bus stop. The routes need to all be looked at. It needs to be different. It should not take 45 minutes to go around a route in Columbia. I have not looked at the draft. I apologize. But just from my observations and from what I understand from the people that I've talked to about it, our bus system is really not a viable system at this point and needs to be looked at to be renovated.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Foster?
Well, I think there's general agreement that we need to do more with the bus system. We looked at the draft of the in a work session in the last few months, and we actually came up with a lot of questions. And I think that the fact that the council had a lot of questions about the study in its draft form, it means that we really weren't satisfied with it. And there were certain things that we weren't seeing that we wanted to see. So it's been sent back to the consultant to come back to us again. And I'm frankly not sure just when that is going to happen, but I would anticipate somewhere in the next couple of months. One of the things, for instance, that I talked to them about when I had the opportunity to talk to the consultant previous to the study being done was microtransit. I think we're just going to have to be innovative about the way that we get people around in the city. And for a town our size, I think it's challenging. We're sort of betwixt and between, as it were, in terms of what we're able to offer. And one of the main issues we're facing right now is that we just have a driver shortage. And that has been an issue that has been going on for a while. We make some progress and then we take some steps back. So we need to address that issue. How do we get people into the seat as bus drivers, and how do we keep them there? What do we need to do to be sure that they're taken care of? I had a conversation with the city manager about this just recently. I want to be sure that the drivers are taken care of on the routes. When all of this, I think, and we're really with so many things, I think it's important to know that there are fiscal ramifications for anything that we do. When we get stuff from staff and they have recommendations, there's always a fiscal note. What is this going to cost and how do we pay for it? When it comes to paying for the kind of bus system that we want, we have to consider that and decide how much of a priority is this, and are we willing to pay for what we want to have?
Okay, as you can hear from my alarm, it's rung. Okay, there's another question. Well, actually, Pam Springsteel has a couple of questions. I would say, I'll ask the first one. Are local regulations and zoning statutes keeping developers from building more in Columbia? Nick Foster?
In a word, yes. This is why when I was first elected, I was asked by someone at the Affordable Housing Coalition, Nick, what can we do to help you in your new role on council? I said, help me with policies and procedures so that we can encourage construction. So one of the things that came out of the Affordable Housing Coalition was the need for a housing study. And the housing study does have specific recommendations about what we can do to address this. I also think we need to, and every time I talk to someone who's in this business, who's a developer, a builder, or even in the trades, I ask them about this. What are the things that are most difficult about doing this kind of work in the city? And they all have a story to tell. This goes back to what I was saying a while ago about an ombudsperson. Sometimes what happens is someone gets partway through the process, and then they have to come to the city. The city changes what they're asking for, and then there's a cost to that when people have to redesign the development that they're doing. So we need to find ways to do that. I also think there are creative things that we can do in terms of financing. We do have a housing trust fund now. One of the things that the housing department is looking at is how do we incentivize developers to do the kind of construction that we need. And I suspect that at least a portion of that, which is funded out of the general fund excess revenues, we put $1 million into that fund to get it started. I suspect that that's going to be part of it, and it's kind of hard for me to imagine that it wouldn't be. Also, I think something when I went to Madison, Wisconsin with the chamber a couple of years ago, they're doing some really terrific things on housing in Madison, Wisconsin, an interesting place. But they've done things with TIF financing, which doesn't necessarily have a good reputation around here. And I think we would have to reframe the use of TIF to say that this particular approach is being taken for the benefit of the community and not just for the developer.
Okay. Mr. Graves.
In a word, yes. I want to bring up a project that's been in the news recently, the 14-unit low-income development that is over on Providence Road near the CMCA office, near Hickman High School. I was talking to the developer of that project. This project has been in the works for about 2.5 years, 3 years. They were delayed for 2 years because of the requirements that the city and codes have put on them for a small 14-unit development. It also cost them an additional $250,000 to meet those standards where housing was before. To me, when we're trying to develop low-income housing in Columbia, it would seem that there should be a lot more ease for these developers to build what they need. I agree with Nick 100% about using the TIF funding. The use of TIFs have been outrageous in Columbia, but I think for low-income housing and the way it is used for that, it would be a fantastic way to incentivize builders and developers to do something like that. We have a great developer in Columbia that builds a lot of low-income senior housing, and I'm wondering how we can turn that type of developer into building some low-income non-senior housing. Thank you.
This is
thank you.
David Robinson, just reminding you that it's now 1 p.m., but we started 10 minutes late. So if our candidates don't mind sticking around for 5 or 10 minutes, we'll just continue.
That's what I figured we'd probably have to do. Pam did have, let's see. All right. Pam Springsteel also asked, are there any empty areas in the fourth ward that can be built up? I guess infill. Mr. Graves, you're first.
In my mind, I'm going through the fourth ward and what areas there are. We're a pretty full area. I mean, there may be empty lots here and there, but the fourth ward is a pretty urban, home centered area. Not a lot of pockets of commercial, but there's a lot of areas in that I don't really see anywhere in my mind that there are any areas that can be built up. I do believe, though, that the fourth ward hits the west side of our city limits, and I feel like that will be the next area, one of the next areas to start to be developed. The Pershing Creek, crossing the Pershing Creek is going to happen at some point, and that will probably be the expansion of the fourth ward, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foster.
Yeah, I agree with that point. Most of what's going to happen in terms of the growth of the fourth ward is going to be in terms of annexation and new development that's taking place in the county. And if you go out toward UU, for instance, you'll see that there has been a good bit of development there over the past several years, and I think that will continue to be true. Other than that, there's not a lot of infill in the fourth ward, but there are in other places in the city. And let's go back to transit for a minute. One of the concepts that I've been introduced to is transit-oriented development. That is that you develop areas of the city and develop transit along those areas at the same time. And I do think that there are several places where that could happen. Two in particular, Paris Road has been brought up, Route B. I think that this is a prime area for doing that kind of development. I think it would be a great challenge, but in concept, in principle, that's something I would love to see us do. And that would help with those manufacturing companies that are out there as well in terms of getting their workers to work and home. Down Providence Road, I think there are some opportunities, and up Range Line in particular. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for both commercial and housing development. The question is, how do we get from here to there? Other than that, I drive around. When I'm driving around the city, I'm always looking around to see where empty lots are. And in fact, I did find one of those that I've wondered about for a long time that's in the fourth, not very far from me where I live. And I've lived in the far southwestern part of the fourth ward. Now I live in the far northeastern part of the ward. So I've kind of got the whole area covered in that way. But there is this one lot that I found out was owned by the people who live on the other side of that lot. And the reason that they never wanted to sell it is they didn't want to look down on anybody else's home and their garbage. Well, I get that, but that's also a prime lot that could be developed. I think encouraging people to look at opportunities that are there, as few as they are, would be helpful to us.
Okay, thank you. Well, part of my format is that you both have a chance to wind up your presentation. So we're through with the questions. And
actually, Leslie,
yeah?
David
Yeah.
Littlefield had a question a long time in the chat about the Opportunity Center.
Oh, all right. There is one. All right. Well, if you want to take that, it says, can you give us an update on the Opportunity Center? What more do we need to do? Okay, well then, I guess Mr. Foster is first here.
I had a conversation. Well, I'll first say that in full transparency, this is a project that is near and dear to me. I worked on this issue for years. We knew for a long time that we needed a center that would be a place where people would be able to go 24/7 around the clock, 365 days a year. And we've done some things to sort of fill the gaps there, but we still are a long way from, we were still a long way from where we need to be. And I want to be careful to say that when the Opportunity Campus is in place and the work that goes on there, it's going to make a big difference, but it will not solve everything related to homelessness. We still will have work to do. I did speak to someone there recently, and they really have been doing a lot of foundational work. But I think that before too long, and I'm sure this part of the winter isn't very helpful, we'll start to see the superstructure itself go up from the ground. They have 81% or better of the funding secured for the construction of the building. They have plans for how they're going to fund the ongoing services that take place there. The city will need to continue to be a part of that. Just because we have a campus doesn't mean the city can just back away from being supportive of the services that will be provided there. And the county and private interest as well, of course. But that's where they are right now. It's been a little while since I've driven out that way. I used to go by on a regular basis, but it's coming, and it's just I'm not sure what the time frame is for that. I have not asked about that, so I can't tell you when it's going to be finished, but it's on its way.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Graves.
I find it, I'm going to address an issue that I see is that in the question itself is, do we have an update on the Opportunity Center and what more do we need to do? As a city, the Opportunity Center is actually being built for and paid for by Voluntary Action Center. It is not a city-run facility. The city has paid or has given a lot of funds toward that project, but it is not a city facility. And I think that we need to keep that in our mind, that the Voluntary Action Center it runs that program. That is their program with partners that they have been putting together over the past couple of years to bring this to reality. Now, I think it's a great project. I really think, though, that we need to, I think by building this, though, we are going to see a large increase in homeless coming to our community for help that are not residents of our community. I mean, our tax dollars are going to pay for others, which, well, we should be compassionate for others. But I've actually heard about a program, about a homeless program in Lawrence, Kansas, and I'm going to be talking with them next week about how they are helping their citizens in their community to home and house, and helping the homeless that have come into their community from others to go to the community that they should have support in, to help them get back there to get the support that they have. Thank you.
Okay, now we can have final questions or final summaries from each one of you. And so I guess we'll, for the introductions, Nick Foster started. But I think we can start with Mr. Graves this time. And 10 after, so you have 3 minutes to give us a summary of how things are going, or whatever you want to say.
Okay, thank you. First of all, for inviting us, and I'm going to for two things. The first was working for the federal government. They have the rules in place that employees can only run in nonpartisan elections. So I've actually been assigned an attorney through the Office of Inspector General to ask questions. And because you are a partisan organization, I had to get permission to actually speak to you, which is ridiculous, I think. But I want to thank you for the opportunity, and I want to apologize for being late this morning. we thought we would be in Kansas City by this time. So, but again, I really want to emphasize the three areas that I'm looking at: public safety. I believe that fire and police department need more support in our community. The second being infrastructure, infrastructure within use in transportation, our community. I really think that we need to find a better way to allow those developers that would want to build housing in our community for those that can't afford it, an easier way to get there. It's very difficult to build housing in Columbia, and we need to make it easier for the ones that are building the small and low income housing. So thank you all very much, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Foster.
Thanks. I do want to speak to something that Ron said a few minutes ago about funding for the Opportunity Campus. I think it's important to remember that the city buys services from agencies in the city. That happens for a lot of different things. It certainly happens for homelessness. The city provides funding for Room at the Inn right now, for instance, for Turning Point and for others. They're providing services to homeless persons. And I would anticipate that we should continue funding that when those programs move to Voluntary Action Center. I'd also point out that the city has helped to fund this. The largest single funder is the state of Missouri through ARPA funding. I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here and for the opportunity to talk with you and to hear your very good questions. I really like this format. It seems more conversational to me than a lot of forums, and I do enjoy that. I believe that I bring experience to this, and I believe I bring the desire to be a public servant in this role. This is what I want to do to serve my community, and I believe that I had preparation going into it in the first term that definitely helped me. But the experience I have after being in the seat for 3 years certainly contributes all the more to my ability to serve the Fourth Ward and the city as a whole. I look forward to doing that. I look forward to moving things forward, and I would encourage you to check out my website, fosterforfourth.com. That's all spelled out, FOSTERFORFOURTH.com. You can also find me on Facebook, and I'd be glad for you to follow me there as well. Look forward to seeing you all in the community, because I know that you're all out and about all the time. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you very much. Well, I have to say, I'm glad I'm not in the Fourth Ward, because I don't think I would like to choose. But I guess I will turn this over to our presiding officer. Is that David?
That's me, David Robinson,
Okay.
president of
Alrighty.
Muleskinners. And I really thank Nick Foster and Ron Graves for this really excellent exchange of views and ideas. And of course, our own Leslie Clay, the inimitable format for this. It does work out very well, we think, and that's why we allowed the extra time to do it. But that's the end of our program. We were in the middle of membership business meeting, and